Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Welcome back to the second part of the conversation that I'm having with Peter Rios about Terry Moore's Rachel Rising. As you recall from last episode, we left off at issue 11, and here we pick up immediately at issue 12. I hope you enjoy the rest of our examination of Rachel Rising.
What do you want to take 12? Since that's the last of the red covers, I guess you could say.
Okay. Let's see here. So at this point, I must have missed something here. So Malice in Jet's body talks to Zoe in the hospital. He informs her that she will bear his Antichrist. So that's the 7 generations thing that he talked about earlier. Zoe laughs at him, which he does not take well. Let's see here. Later, Malice decides that Jet's probably not the body he needs to be in, I guess. And so Jet goes into what do they call those in the hospital?
Chapel.
Chapel, thank you. Goes in the chapel, and there's a priest there, and he kills the guy and then possesses his body. But he kills the guy, but then gets into the priest's body by killing Jet yet again. So he electrocutes Jet so that she'll die, although she's already dead, right? So I'm not sure how that works out. But anyway, Jet dies again, and he takes possession of the priest's body. Rachel does indeed dig her way out of the grave and proclaims that she knows, and that Lilith has made a big mistake. So imagine what she had to go through, considering what we saw at the end of 11, with her head facing down in the ground, and it's pretty deep. I don't know. It's comic book art, but I'm going to guess that it's going to be a good 10, 12 feet that she's underground, and it's winter. The ground is frozen. Although we see people digging up the grave. There's a scene later with Rachel and another grave site, and the dirt seems easily moved, even though it's wintertime. But anyway, but imagine what she goes through to dig herself out of that hole. To come back out. But yeah, that whole bit at the end where she knows something, and Lilith has definitely made a mistake. So now what's that?
And we also have a scene where Earl once again comes across Jet's dead body, and he has to care for her and clean her up, and he's sitting there in remorse. Yeah,
I think this is in 13, but Dr. Seaman again shows up. to take care of Jet's dead body again, but another dead body. This guy does a lot of house calls, and he says, "What an extraordinary death that she is having," which again, plays into the whole affectatious nature of these characters. It's like, okay, this is happening. All right,
right. And I can't remember if it was an issue before this or after this, but Lilith also when she was confronting Malice, she says, I want to know where are you dropping your seed? I want to know what you're up to, and he doesn't tell her. But I can't remember if that's the issue where he's all wrapped up in the tree, or if it's a later issue. I couldn't find the dialogue.
Oh, yeah. I think it's that one. I think it's issue 11
okay,
not 11, but okay.
That started that whole Antichrist thing, even though he didn't say it that way.
Yeah. Unless you have something for 12, I'll move on. Okay, so number 13, like I said, Dr. Seaman shows up, and then he's talking to Earl, and he launches into this monologue about fairy tales. So basically, I'm not quite sure if he's just making an analogy here, or if he's actually encouraging Earl to kiss the girl. This is Sleeping Beauty. This is the analogy he's making between Jet and the fairy tale. So, but most important is that he talks about the quote unquote real story from the 16th century. And so, like I said earlier, it's at least implied heavily that Dr. Seaman was the priest or friar or whatever the religious figure it was from that time that is shown in that story, and that he has a lifelong interest in alchemy. He tells Earl, so he tells Earl that he is Jet's anchor, and that death is no match for love. And I don't know that we talked about this, Peter. Jet at one point, I think it's after her first resurrection, after she first dies, she tells Earl that his touch is the only thing that she can feel. She can't feel anybody else when they touch her, but Earl, she can feel. Right. So, and I think Earl tells the doctor that, and that's partially why he says that. Let's see. Meanwhile, and here we go. Now we get the witches in cahoots with each other. We see Lilith again, but this is where she is in her dark-haired, slightly different-looking body. Mm-hmm. She's with Mary Scott and Hannah, and they're at the city water facility, and Lilith is there to poison the water. This black oozy thing comes out of her hand and goes into the water pipe. In the meantime, Mary Scott, who is quite the character, we find out, has a zip drive and sticks it into the computer of the city water manager, Mr. Ruiz. And she's putting such heinous, I guess, child pornography on it that she's predicting that the townspeople won't even bother with a trial. They will simply kill him on sight for how bad this is. And I think Hannah's watching the door to make sure no one shows up, and basically tells Mary Scott, don't waste your venom on the guy. But of course, Mary Scott does not listen and just keeps going on this rant. It was this very humorous rant. Let's see. Rachel finds out again that Jet is dead because she's been digging herself out of a grave, so she didn't know that Jet died. Just in time for Earl to show up at her house carrying Jet, and I think that's how the issue ends. Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention the water manager, Mr. Ruiz, is there at the time, but he seems to be sleeping the entire time, so he's under some sort of spell.
Right. Yeah, that fairy tale story is obviously the most important thing in this chapter, and it is it. When you think about demons and witches, is this Dr. Seaman trying to tempt Earl? The crux of the story of the real story of Sleeping Beauty is not that she was woken up with a kiss, but more or less woken up because she was violated by her intended husband, who had been sitting by her side for a long time, overcome with grief, and she wasn't waking up, and then he violates her, and then she actually does wake up. Now, did she wake up because she was violated? Is that just the fairy tale part of it, that they turned it into a kiss? Was she just in a coma, and the trauma of that act woke her up? We don't know, but her intended husband had then jumped out of a window and was being eaten by crows. So it's a gruesome story, and if that really is Dr. Seaman back in that time, is he trying to tempt Earl? Is he doing it for scientific purposes? Is he trying to see if the fairy tale will work again? I mean, it's really kind of sick and twisted, but it speaks to Earl's character that he says, no, I got to take her to Rachel, and you could see Earl struggling with that knowledge that he could help her, but he doesn't. He takes her to Rachel. So good on Earl for doing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he sighs a lot when during this issue. As Dr. Seaman unveils these revelations. It's also interesting. You mentioned, was the woman in the story, was she in a coma? And I think in an earlier issue, Johnny and Rachel talk about this, about how the dead. The wakes were instituted because people would appear to be dead and then would be buried, and then they would uncover the graves for whatever reason and find people with the dead bodies with the skin torn off of their fingers and their nails gone because they're trying to scratch themselves out of the grave. And they also put in, bells or a rope attached to a bell above the gravesite, so people could be notified, hey, they're not actually dead. So
Right.
you get that echo of that knowledge in this story. Okay, 14. Rachel and
Okay.
Earl wait for Jet to wake up again. Poor Jet. Meanwhile, Noah's brother and sister show up. Sister-in-law show up at Natalie's house looking for Noah, and there's this little back and forth between those two, and it struck me that Noah's brother actually is concerned about his brother, even though apparently Noah has gotten himself into some trouble before and they had to help him out and blah blah blah. But what's really interesting about that scene is that Natalie is there. So apparently she's back from their foray to the city water place, and she's at the door listening to this conversation, but there's a tear coming down her face.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it appears to be. And so what is that about?
Yeah.
Rachel remembers burying a box in her past life. So now we're finally getting, Rachel's memories, or past memories are returning in greater detail, and goes to find it, but in her memory, so she planted some trees and then counted the steps and then buried the box. And this is the connection that I found, Peter, to Echo. Apparently that box appears in Echo.
Ah, okay.
So I'm not sure what the direct connection is, but there it is. And anyway, so she counts, buries the box, and then we're back in the present, and Rachel is standing there, and you can see the trees now grown in the background, and she's looking at the spot where she buried it, and guess what? There's a street there now. Let's see. As she's there, though, Zoe passes by Rachel in a car driven by her, I guess, her new caseworker. And she jumps out of the car and runs to Rachel, but then is frightened away by her dead sister / Mary Scott showing up. And so I presume that Zoe sees her sister as she was when she killed her, but Rachel sees her at first as Mary Scott, and she does see her. Mary Scott does reveal what Zoe sees, but so that's interesting. So they talk, and this is where Mary Scott basically comes down on Rachel and appears to be quite angry at Rachel for not remembering who she really is, and tells her, "You better remember, or just stay out of the way." And then I think at the end of the issue, Zoe is found by the priest that Malice now inhabits.
Right. And at the start of the issue, too, when they're trying to revive Jet, they're talking to Johnny, and she's saying, well, does she have any pulse? And she's barely there. And then Earl says, wait, try again. And he holds her hand, and it actually starts to be a little bit more frequent. So
yeah, there you
again,
go.
Connecting that back to Earl. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a fairly straightforward issue on that.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those, but then every once in a while you get a nice kick in the pants, so to speak.
Did you say that Mary Beth was also chiding Rachel because she couldn't remember her name? Like that had come up there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right, because we still don't know who Rachel's past life was. So we see her in this issue as a young woman, in that old clothing. So it's it's in that past that they've been talking about, but we still know who she is, and what her story is.
So 15.
Yeah.
Jet finally wakes up, and in her particular funny personality quirk, she's wondering why she's naked once again in front of Earl. Every time she wakes up from the dead, she's naked in front of Earl. And she gets a little more serious with this, and she says, I swear if I find out that you messed with me, you'll wish you were dead. And he has he has sweat, and his cheeks are all red, and the poor guy, he did no wrong, but he's so much of a gentleman that he's ashamed that yeah, he was there while she was naked, but that's not why. So I felt bad for him in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel goes to visit her mother in the cemetery, Marianne Woodall, Johnny's sister, and to say that these things are going on. And in the same way that she touched Zoe's face to get information, she's wondering, can I touch her mother and get some more information? But those graves are certainly shallow because she shoves a hand into the dirt and she's able to touch it with her fingertips. So that certainly can't be 6 feet deep.
Maybe she has really long arms.
Maybe. But then she just digs and digs and punches her way through the coffin, and makes you wonder how much strength she actually has.
Mm-hmm.
And she does touch her mom's dead face, but then she yanks her hand back again, and
she's crying out and
right.
distraught about what she saw.
Right. So it's a question, what did she see? What we don't know any of that information, at least by this point. Johnny is fed up of being cooped up, and she's taking medicine from Carol, but she keeps saying this water smells funny. And then we go to different parts of the city where things are happening in the sewage system, in the water system, because of the previous issue, which with the 3 witches. And all of a sudden, rats and rat hair and rat tails start coming out of the pipes, and Jet sees one come out of her faucet in the bathtub, almost impossibly. And she freaks out, and that was a pretty funny scene. She jumps on Earl's back, and as they run out of as Rachel comes to the house, she's piggybacked onto Earl's back. She's half naked, and they're screaming about the rats. And she tries to say that Rachel says, "Why are you naked?" And she says, "Well, ask him." And all Earl can say is rats.
He points at the door. Look over there. Do not focus on me at this moment. That was great.
And we see Zoe. She seems to end a lot of issues, and every time a rat pops up out of a pipe, we don't know quite where she is just yet. She smacks its head right off with a bat. God,
that girl and animals is just really upsetting.
Yeah.
Did you notice too in that scene, Peter, where Rachel's at her mother's gravesite? So when she first arrives, there's this quick panel showing an angel, a statue of an angel, and it's a weeping angel, not the Doctor Who variety. It's just an angel there, but it's there's a dark spot, or dark areas coming down from its eyes to denote, the angel's weeping. I guess presumably over the death of Christ, right?
Right.
And so then that scene unfolds with Rachel and touching her mother and how she reacts to that. And then before we leave that scene, that angel shows back up in a panel. And to me, it appears that the angel is crying even more tears.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also it appears, again, to me, that the mouth of the angel seems to be scowling a bit. So it's, the statue is reacting to this situation. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. A lot of visual stuff going on in this town of Manson.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to, let's go on to 16. You want to do that?
Okay.
And
sure.
Then I'll come in.
Okay. 16 opens up. They have this discussion that it's still snowing, and is that part of the curse? And Johnny, ever the rational one, is trying to figure out what does all this mean. There's all these metaphors: the snow falling, people will fall like the snow, and we shall rise like oaks and wear them like a coat. She talks about that quote, and they're trying to compare Jet's story with Rachel's story and how they differ and how they're the same. And of course, Rachel and Jet make a little joke, and that's when it comes out that what you said. Johnny says, "Do you mind? Carol's Catholic." Jet says, "Sorry, Carol. Sorry, you're Catholic." And But Jet doesn't quite know why she said that. And then she says something about priests. And she says, I don't know why, but the thought of a priest scares the hell out of me. So clearly she's having residual memories of when Malice was in her body and then jumped to the priest, killed the priest, and then jumped into his body. So she's having some kind of connection there, even though she doesn't know what it is just yet. She also has memory loss. She doesn't remember going to visit the hospital to see Zoe. So basically she doesn't remember anything between getting the brace around her neck and until Malice left her body. So, this should make Rachel and the rest of them sort of wonder what's going on, but they don't know exactly what's going on with Malice yet. So there's no way to make the connections. Speaking of Malice, we see him and Zoe, they're at a church, and he says to her, how did you get up there? She's like in this high windowsill. And she says, I'm a good climber, to referencing back to that image of her all the way up in that tree,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though that doesn't give us much answers, it certainly gives us something. And he teases her with the idea of telling her where she's from, something about a knife, and that it used to belong to an old friend named Jack. So now, are we supposed to assume Jack the Ripper?
I think so, especially when we
okay.
find out when he talks about her, was it great grandfather, something like that.
Great grandfather, yeah. And then it ends. The issue ends with back at the field again with the other witches, and they're watching Lilith go through yet another change. And Lilith starts telling the story of being the first woman, and she doesn't name him. I don't think she does, but she's clearly talking about Adam. He left me here to suffer the children of another woman. He left me to watch them multiply. He left me because I didn't please him, because I ate of the tree of life and could not die. He left me to watch the garden rot, to watch creation burn. It's interesting passage here. And they're just watching her as she's burning up in the flames, making probably yet another change. And then the book ends with Zoe finding the knife, finding a goat out back, seeing how sharp this knife actually is, slicing the goat's neck, killing the goat. Just there's no demon inside her this time. And the priest is looking on, very happy that she's doing this. Obviously, he's creating something. He's creating a killer in her, or something.
Yeah, that out of everything that we've seen Zoe do so far, and I'm referring to everything that comes up in issues we haven't talked about yet, that scene in particular really bothered me. Just, so like you said, she's testing how sharp the knife is, and she just pulls the knife up vertically against the side of the throat of that goat. And then, as the blood's rushing out of the goat, it starts running around frantically, crying out in its goat voice. and it finally just kind of collapses on the ground, panting, and she's trying to calm it down, and it'll be okay. Just, I don't know, just that the brutality of the scene in the way that Terry Moore presents it in such a calm and cool manner on the part of Zoe that is probably one of the more horrific things in this story.
Yeah.
And then she does something to a dog here coming up that's not quite as bad, but it's still what does this girl have against animals?
I mean, it has to be. I have to imagine it's just residual stuff from being possessed. I mean, look what's happened. I mean, and she was possessed for how many years? 47 years. So I think Malice is just trying to turn her into something that she doesn't want to be, or she's slowly accepting it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you like you say, she's not possessed by Malice anymore, and yet she does this. Right. But there is a panel after she, I can't remember if it's after she does it or before she does it. I think it's after she kills the goat. Her eyes turn dark.
Yeah.
And so, is that just one of those things where it's just a play on, lighting in that scene, or is there something else going on? You have to wonder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Homestretch.
Yeah. You talked about the memory loss and yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Number 17, getting close here. So the issue opens with Rachel and Jet walking outside, and Rachel is telling Jet about Zoe's backstory and about the history of violence and killing involved. You don't know that it's Zoe until Rachel reveals to Jet that's who she's talking about. They return to Johnny's house. As they're out, someone. I love how Moore brings in these little moments of humor amongst the intense, if you will, scenes. But they're walking out there. They have no coats on. In the middle of winter, it's snowing out, and someone says, you'll catch your death in cold or something like that. Just make some comment about them. They'll die if they don't put on coats, and they just look at each other and smile. They return back to, I think it's Johnny's house. Carol is making dinner. Rachel again talks to Johnny about how what's happening is it's not scientific. And, you talked about that before in one of the previous issues about how Johnny keeps trying to come up with reasons why this is going on. And Rachel is telling her, no, this is witchcraft. And of course, Johnny doesn't buy it. She's too ensconced in the scientific world to buy it, even though the evidence is essentially staring her in the face that something else that cannot be explained by science is going on. Carol announces that dinner's ready, and this is where we see the painting by Kachu. And they talk about that, and Jet makes that comment about working in the studio. Let's see. Oh, okay. So back to the witches in the field. So Lilith has, I guess, burned up in the flame, and the flames have died down. The other two are sitting there, and two hunters come by. And one of them gets a little, I'll say, frisky with them. And Mary Scott does not react well to that and basically sicks her wolves on them. And the last panel of the issue shows Lilith rising from the ashes. Any thought? Any other things on that issue?
In the scene where they're walking in the snow and they notice a cat being eaten by rats, Jet makes a comment that this town is getting mean.
Yeah.
So the effects are certainly. I mean, we've seen Johnny's dog Priscilla react that way to Rachel, very scared of her. And we'll see more of Priscilla later. This is the issue where Johnny talks about people being buried too early and having the bells.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So that happens in this issue. Jet and Carol have a conversation about the situation going on and how Carol can just take it so calmly. I think it's Terry Moore is great at just creating these characters that are kind of like on the sideline, and they're there, but they don't seem very important, but then they're suddenly going to become very important. Rachel's body isn't healing from the car accident from way back in issue whatever that was, 4, 5, 3, whatever. She still has a hole in her, so even though she's dead, it's not like she's repairing. So there's conversations about that too. So I think that's everything else I had on that.
All right. Number 18. So Lilith, as we found out last issue, Lilith has returned. Now she's a blonde again, which I'm still trying to figure what that's all about. Why the change? Why now blonde again? That kind of thing. I mean, it's probably just one of those little details that doesn't really matter, but for some reason I'm really focused on that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I had a thought about it just now when you sort of were talking about all these changes and all her different looks, and I seem to remember reading a story or reading an interview with Neil Gaiman, and he was talking about Sandman and how he used the 3 witches that were used in an old DC horror book. So a lot of DC's horror books had narrators. You know, they had Kane for the House of Mystery, I think, and Abel for the House of Secrets, or
right.
flip-flopped. James Robinson used a character named Charity in Starman, and she was actually a narrator for one of those old horror tales. I forget which one. Madame Xanadu, Destiny, and so were the three witches. And I forget their names. I think one of them was like Mordred and Cynthia or something like that. Anyway, so this idea of a trio of women is prevalent in literature and different parts of literature. You know, there's the idea of the young maiden, the middle-aged matron or wife or whatever you want to call it, and the old crone, and that's what the three witches were in Neil Gaiman's books. And I think in that interview he mentioned that Adam actually had three wives, not just Eve, not just Lilith, but a third one as well. And I'd have to look it up again, but there's some accounts where Lilith was named, and there's even some literature and some stories that connect Lilith with being one of the first vampires. And I know the mark of Cain has also been attributed to, you know, in some stories, they connect like the mark of Cain with vampires as well. So there was Lilith, there was Eve, and then there was a third woman. I don't remember if the third woman was named or not, but I'm wondering if maybe I don't think this is what he's doing, but it kind of made me feel like she was cycling through the three women that were with Adam, you know, even though I know she talked about, you know, Adam leaving her and stuff like that, but it just felt like it felt kind of reminiscent of that. It also felt like, you know, people always, there's a joke about, not a joke, but where they talk about women being variations of a theme. And I'm wondering if that's what Terry Moore is practicing here, if he's like just sort of cycling her through. There's also the crazy notion that she kind of looks like Kachu one time, and then she kind of looks like Francine another time, and then she looks like the other blonde from Strangers in Paradise.
Yes.
So again, this whole cycling, this trio, this variation, I don't know if that's what he's going for, but I'm just sort of throwing these speculations out there.
Oh, yeah, you might be onto something there, Peter.
Because Francine gets a streak of white hair. I don't quite remember where it is, and Lilith had that. So again, I'm not sure if that's what he's doing, but hey, if it means it's connecting the three different three different comics in my brain, I'll play around with that. Why not? It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it also reminds me of a Piers Anthony Xanth novel. I don't know if you've read those.
No, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, there's I think it's in the first book, even, A Spell for Chameleon. You know, I read that a lifetime ago, it seems like. But there's a character that the lead character runs into, and it turns out to be the same woman, but from his perspective, it's three different women. And what happens is her magic ability is that as the day goes on. So when she first wakes up, she's this beautiful, voluptuous woman, but she's dumb as a rock. And at midday, she's an average-looking person, but she has, you know, a higher level of intelligence. And then at the end of the day, she turns into an old crone. So you kind of get that same that triad of women, if you will,
right,
in the story. So yeah, that whole Strangers in Paradise connection, had not occurred to me. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I doubt it'll stick, but hey, you know, the dark-haired girl with a white streak sounds kind of Francine-ish to me.
Yeah, you know, it's probably just Terry Moore, you know, tipping his hat at us, you know, fans of his works. It may not actually connect to anything specifically to the story, but I don't know. Okay, so let's see the rest of this issue. So like I said, Lilith returned. She sees Mama Lai, the angel of death, and she calls out to her, basically asking if Maimalai will take her with her. I think this is where we see Maimalai take the spirits. So the two hunters that were killed, their spirits both walk towards her. She holds out her hand to one, and this is the one that was kind of insulting. Not kind of, he was. He was the bad guy of the two. The other guy was just kind of there and was in the wrong place at the right time, I guess. Anyway, she holds her hand out and touches the spirit of the bad guy, and the spirit seems to burn up and just kind of float away like ashes. And the other guy just goes with her. And as they're leaving, Lilith is despondent and crying out and wanting to go. And I think it's Hannah that tells Mary Scott that Maimalai cannot talk to Lilith. She's forbidden from interacting with Lilith at all.
Right.
Detective Corpel, back to the land of the living, questions Mr. Ruiz and believes that the poor guy had nothing to do with what was found on the computer, and also the treasonous act of poisoning the city's water, because he has pictures of the three women there, taken from surveillance cameras, I guess. So we actually have evidence of these women and what they're doing, and not just disappearing on us all the time as they have been. Let's see. Malice steers Zoe into killing a murderer of young boys. So he's got this guy tied up in one of the back rooms in the church, and tells Zoe that this is a bad guy, and also talks more about the knife that she has. And this is where we find out that it belonged to her great-grandfather.
Right.
And this is where I think correctly you're connecting her great-grandfather with Jack the Ripper.
Right. Right.
Earl arrives at Johnny's at the end of the issue. He looks in, he's knocking on the door, no one's answering. He looks in the window and sees all the women around the table, and they are dead, apparently poisoned by Carol, because she left a note stating that the end times had come, the dead are walking the earth, and she wanted to spare Johnny and her loved ones from what was coming.
Right.
Which, wow, out of left field that came.
Yeah, and it connects back to that conversation she had with Jet, and Jet says, "Did Johnny tell you that we're dead?" And it makes me think. It's hard, right? She loves Johnny, but she obviously has very strong faith, and she's willing to kill everybody for something that she believes is an abomination or the end times. So I thought that was when I read that, I was like, whoa, because I thought for sure Johnny was dead. I said, wow, I can't believe he just killed Johnny.
Yeah.
Carol was more or less a throwaway character for the longest time.
Exactly.
And he lays this on us, and it speaks volumes of her character. Whether she was right or wrong doesn't matter. It's just that she believes that strongly to take that action against people she should be loving, and or maybe she believes that she loves them so much that she can do this and hope that God will forgive and send him up to heaven or wherever, or she thinks that she's killing Rachel and Lilith because they believe that they're dead. I mean, it's just there's no way you can know for sure. And I'm sure Terry Moore would rather us talk about why, and just have our own sort of reactions to us, and then never really give us an answer, because that's what great literature does. That's what great comics do. I thought that was a spectacular scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although I have to admit, Peter, that when I first read that, I'm like, she was coerced into it in some way, like we thought Zoe was in the stuff at the beginning of the story. But when I reread it, I thought, it would be a better story if she wasn't coerced.
Right, exactly. That's always I have to imagine a writer is like that. No matter how horrible a thing you can write, sometimes what happens in reality in our life. Sometimes when you read the news, you sort of go, that nobody could dream that up. Nobody could dream that up, and yet it happens in real life. And this is kind of like one of those moments. Who would have ever expected Carol to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Anything else about that issue, Peter? So that was that was 18. So that ends the next arc, or the last arc. And then now we're going into the I guess, which is, like I said, if issue 24 is the end of the overall story arc, this is the last 6 issues ish of the story arc. So what a way to end that part of the arc, with all those characters' deaths in that way.
Yeah, she does. Lilith, in the beginning, when she's screaming at Mai, she talks about how she's being condemned for hating Eve, and that she's stuck to suffer amongst Eve's children, and just a little more connection there. And I did think it was interesting that the Angel of Death turned very skull-like and let one of the hunters sort of dissipate, but yet walked another one off. So I sort of wanted, which one is the good one? I assume the one she walks off into whatever, valley of death. Yea, though I walk through the shadow of death, all that. It kind of made me think that must be the one that is favored, the one hunter that maybe wasn't quite so evil to the girls. And yet the other one was just doomed to forever wander the earth through the air and, I don't know, molecules. So I thought that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think you're right, though, because there's another scene coming up where Mai shows up, and we get a similar spiritual interaction. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Now, these last few issues, this is where I start getting really sort of like, whoa, I'm confused. What's going on? Because they jump around with all these stories. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because we learned some secrets, we learned some real names, and some weird things about Jet and all that. But I thought, especially when, let's push on.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about these issues. But I was like, wait, all right.
Okay, so number 19. This is where, like you said, we find out who Rachel was. We get flashback to her previous life, and her name is Bryn Aaron. What's her last name? Bryn Aaron McKenna.
McKenna, yeah.
And we see her first encounter with Lilith. So Lilith shows up on the McKenna farm on horseback.
With Bryn Aaron's mother there.
Yes, the mother is there. The father shows up in a minute, but the mother's sitting there. Lilith tells Mother McKenna that Bryn has a special gift. How the mother McKenna sees trees and birds and whatnot, but Bryn sees the spirits there, and she wants to help develop that special gift. Of course, Mother McKenna wants nothing to do with it and calls her names and refuses, of course. Lilith basically puts a spell on her, I'll say, and gets her to shut up. She can't talk. Let's see. And while this is going on, we flash back or flash forward to our present in the story, and we see Rachel. It's really cool the way that Terry Moore did it. Everything, a lot of it's black, and all you see really is what you see through Rachel's eyes, and so she sees Earl over her, talking to her, trying to get her to wake up. But then as the panels go down the page, things turn dark again because she's drifting off again, and then we go back to the past. Bryn is hiding from the townsfolk out in the woods or out in the field, who are trying to kill her because the massacre has started. Her friend James, that has been talked about several times, comes to warn her that the militia is coming for her. They talk about running away, or she does. She tries to get him to take some sap from the first tree on Earth so that they will live forever and be together. And she reveals that it's Lilith who provided this sap and tells her what the power of that sap is. He refuses and is shot by someone coming up. As he dies, Lilith, as he dies, Bryn Aaron forces the sap down his throat and kind of holds it there. And then, it's really interesting. She's trying to save him, but at the same time, it seems like she's, from an outsider's perspective, it looks like she's trying to asphyxiate him.
Choke him, yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the issue, Rachel wakes up fully and leans over to Jet, whispering, "James, it's time to wake up."
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Like we needed more left curves,
Yeah. Who's in whose body? It's like a constant shell game here, especially with poor Jet.
And why? And why is she suddenly remembering her name? And why, at least as far as this issue goes, why is she remembering her name? How does she know it's James in that body? And you have to look at those two scenes. The one where Lilith confronts Bryn Aaron's parents on the farm, where she kisses the bird. Aaron kisses the bird and restores it back to life to show that she does have power. And then the other scene with James at the end, at the rise of the militia, or the rise of the people killing the young girls. They're two very detailed scenes, and we're going to see them later, and it kind of makes me think, okay, we've seen other scenes where other panels have been the same, like the first time she meets Lewis, or the first time we see Lewis, and then when Rachel sees Lewis again, it's the same panel structure, almost like deja vu. And I guess, now think about, was he trying to set us up for this kind of thing to happen, because it's going to happen soon, where we're going to see these same scenes again in a whole new light, creating more questions than answers, I think.
Yeah, precisely. Anything else?
No, that one, I was surprised when I was reading it, because I thought, wow, another one of those kind of like, here's a whole bunch of more information that we don't know about, and just throwing it right at us. And just, while she's laying there comatose, she's starting to remember these things, and it's nice. It's great that he's giving it to us. But they still don't make sense just yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back to Jet and James, it's now we get a male spirit in a female body. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, or up to this point, I think it's only just been the witches reincarnating in other women's bodies. So that's an interesting turn, definitely.
Right.
So why don't you, Peter, go ahead and head up number 20. I got, out of all my notes, this is the longest paragraph that I wrote for any of these issues.
Oh wow. Okay. So we open up with a what are they called? It's a poem. It's a like Ring Around the Rosie type kind of thing, about Jack the Ripper. 8 little whores, 7 little whores, 6 little whores, glad to be alive. One side is up to Jack, and then there's 5. It's like a little girl jumping rope would sing this, and it certainly has weight. And at the end there it says, and the last one's the ripest for Jack's idea of fun. I wonder if you could also say, and the last one's the rippest for Jack's idea of fun, Jack the Ripper. Anyway, it just kind of, got my head. And then we're flashing to Zoe, and she's properly taking care of her knife, like every good serial killer would, and talking to the priest, and he's wondering why she's dulling it. And she's saying, look, I don't stab, I cut. And she hides it under her body because she knows she can't have a long knife. She's really, it all goes to show just how deep and ingrained a lot of her sociopathic things are, because she can think about these things. She can think about, like, I can't hide a knife in my body. I'm a small girl. They'll see the point, so I need to rub it down to hide it. That's creepy. Mm-hmm. That's just creepy. So he, of course, the Padre, Malice in the form of the father, is saying how much she resembles her own great-great-grandfather, Jack the Ripper. We go back to the house of Johnny and Carol, and Earl is totally confused, and so is James, because he knows he was shot, and yet he wakes up and he's in the body of a woman, and he doesn't understand at all. He doesn't understand where he's at. And while they're freaking out, Earl is trying to say, hey, you got to take care of your aunt and her lover, because they're laying there, getting ready to die. And because Bryn Aaron, Rachel can see sort of these spirits, and she has vision that we don't have, she realizes that Johnny's spirit is ready to leave her. So she grabs Priscilla and throws Priscilla on top of Johnny, hoping that the spirit will go in her, and it does, very comically. So weird. She says, Priscilla? And then she says, Aunt Johnny? And sure enough, the dog yelps, and you realize that the spirit is inside. I mean, I have to assume that's what it is. I mean, we see it clearly happening. Plus, we also see Maimalai show up outside of the door, and she's calling for the spirit of Carol. And as you alluded to earlier, Maimalai has the ghostly Ghost Rider face, and Carol dissipates and disappears. So whatever she did, I have to imagine it wasn't the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's probably what happened there. Still trying to get Jet to believe, or James to believe, that they're in the future by turning on the TV. Let's see what else here. Zoe and the father, or the padre, go walking, and they're sort of near the same place where Rachel was, where she was wondering if she left her box there, buried somewhere. And they're talking once again about, are they going to try to put the Antichrist, the baby, inside Zoe? And she's saying, no way, I'm too young. And he says, don't worry about it, we're going to take another 5 years. And he's trying to say it's not the Antichrist, but she recognizes that, wait a minute, in 5 years I'm going to be 15. That's the same time when Mary had Jesus. So of course you're trying to make it to be the Antichrist. She sees Lilith again and cuts the priest, cuts him wide open, kills him, stabs him, cuts him, in hopes that it would free Malice. And at the end there, you see a spirit floating out into the snow, and you have to assume that Malice has now left the body of the father, who is laying there bloodied. And that's how that issue ends.
So you think it was Lilith there that was standing there, that Zoe sees?
I mean, the last time we saw her, she was blonde. So is it Lilith, or is it was Zoe just seeing it? I tend to think it was Lilith, because she sees her a couple times, and it was kind of like a flashback to some of those earlier times where she would see Lilith and then she would do something bad. So I just assumed, well, is that her again? Is it Lilith's way of saying you need to do this so that you can free yourself from Malice? I don't know. What were your thoughts?
Well, that's a good point. It confused me, really, because it looks like Lilith to me, but yet when Zoe sees her, she smiles. And every other encounter that Zoe had with Lilith before now, it's always been with at least trepidation, if not downright fear. She doesn't want to be near Lilith. But I like your supposition. I think maybe with Lilith's rebirth, resurrection, whatever it is, the change that she went through, mm-hmm. Maybe something is different enough about her that Zoe responds more positively towards her. It's just the juxtaposition of what happened between Zoe and Lilith before, and then this scene that just confused me.
I guess I would have to go back and look at when Malice left Zoe. Had she seen Lilith from that point to this point? And if she hadn't, then I would have to assume there's comfort in seeing Lilith, because she knows whenever she sees Lilith, something bad is going to happen to the person that is doing bad to Zoe. So maybe that's how she gets the strength to go, oh, you know what? I don't need to be in this. And that's why she guts Malice.
That makes a lot more sense. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to go back and look at that and say, okay, so she probably hasn't seen Lilith since before she was, since she's free of malice. But it was a great scene nonetheless, because again, Zoe, breakout character, she can take on a demon.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Like I said at the beginning, yeah, Zoe is certainly stealing the show for me. I mean, I certainly sympathize and want to see what happens with Rachel and all of her friends, but Zoe is you can't really count Malice as a friend, of course. So Zoe's dealing with this on her own.
Yeah.
And Rachel has this support group essentially helping her through this weird thing that's going on in her life. And poor Zoe's out there in the cold, in this case, literally taking care of the situation. So yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the comic relief of Priscilla, Johnny going to Priscilla's body. And also poor James adjusting to the fact that he now has breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, I think in the next issue, there's more of that. But I wanted to mention too, when Rachel touches Johnny, she says that she's still in there. Johnny's still in there.
Oh, right.
And she's a fighter. And then there's that 3-panel scene where Rachel leans down and kisses Johnny, comes up, and then the spirit comes out. So you get that echo of the Sleeping Beauty kiss thing.
Right.
But in this case, it doesn't resurrect anybody. It actually makes her more dead in a way. So I thought that was an interesting choice. Yeah. Okay. So I think you cover. Like I said, I wrote the most about this one, but I'm not sure why. Just there's a lot of things that happen in this issue.
Yeah,
but you covered everything that I had on there.
It's another nice turning point issue. A lot of stuff happens. I should say. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to 21.
Okay.
All right. So I'll do that, and you can finish up the story.
Okay.
So again, Dr. Seaman gets called in because the plan now, Rachel wants to flush out Johnny's body from all the poisons, the toxins that build up when a body dies, because her plan is to get Priscilla, Priscilla/Johnny, because Priscilla has run out after being freaked out about realizing that Johnny is in the dog's body now, runs out into the cold, the snow, and she wants to go find Priscilla and somehow get Johnny's spirit back in Johnny's body, and for that she needs the box.
Right.
Let's see. I think I might have skipped ahead there a little bit. Anyway, let's see. Zoe is hiding out after killing the priest. Someone saw that, so she runs off. She's hiding in, I think it's a gas station bathroom. And is in there freezing. She knows that there's a room on the other side, so she takes the top of the toilet and the lid of the toilet and kind of smashes a hole through there. And a very large dog comes at her. I mean, it's a huge dog. If you look at that scene and you compare the size of the dog to the size of a 9-year-old girl, Zoe, it's huge. Big jaws, scary dog. Anyway, it's coming at her, and again, Terry Moore does these little comedic things in these really tense moments. She grabs a toilet brush and stuffs it into the mouth of the dog. And while the container, she's holding the brush, but the container that the brush was in is stuck in the mouth the mouth of the dog. And the dog stops his attack. And here again, in a sense, she's torturing another animal. What is it with this girl and torturing animals? So the dog stops his attack. It's hacking. Its snot's coming out of its nose. It's crying because it can't breathe very well, and it's this thing is there and it's trying to get it out. Anyway, she climbs through the hole that the dog went through back into, finds the dog on the floor hacking and wheezing, but she does take pity on it, which thank God. Because if she just killed another animal, I don't know what I would do. I definitely would not like Zoe as much as I do. Anyways, but she breaks the container so the dog can breathe and and is feeling better. And she even talks to the dog and says, don't make me regret this. And it doesn't. The dog leaves her alone. She finds there's a VW van. So I guess this is the garage attached to this bathroom or something. Or no, she goes into the gas station. She finds the garage. There's a
Right.
VW van. And she's going to take that, I guess. But then the gas station owner shows up, knows that someone's in there because the dog is barking. And so they play a bit of hide and seek. And the guy starts blasting away with I think it's a shotgun, every little sound. And then he's in the garage. She turns on the van and runs into the guy and busts through the garage door, and then drives off down the road, wiping off the blood from this guy off the windshield with the windshield wipers.
Oh, Zoe.
What does it say about me, Peter, that I love this character so much?
It's the strength of Terry Moore's cartooning and creativity, I guess.
Yeah.
This was the issue, though, that Dr. Seaman mentions about the working for Da Vinci. That was in this issue.
Okay.
Trying to look for it real quick because I thought it was very telling. Another one of those little moments. Oh, here it is. He says, without the spirit stirring molecules to create the electrical pulses needed. And she says, wait, how do you know that? He says, science. She says, science didn't teach you that. No, Da Vinci did, my child. Smart man. The world used to be full of smart men. Again, how old is this guy?
Uh-huh.
What does he know? What does he know that we don't know? Is it real? Is it just he's well read? What is it?
All right. So, Peter, take us home.
All right. So we get issue 22 with a cover that I think is one of the more abstract covers. No pun intended. It is Abstract Studios.
Good one.
Of a couple having a picnic over a dead, probably looks like Malice's dead form skeleton. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was hoping we'd talk about this cover. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, it maybe it's just something as simple as secrets, people sitting over secrets that they don't know about. I don't know. But she's pouring champagne and it's all falling out of the thing. I don't know. It's very confusing. James is still a woman and he has to go to the bathroom and he's learning about the modern conveniences of toiletry, toilets, in a funny scene. And Earl isn't right about all this. He's wondering where Jet is, which makes Rachel finally think, oh yeah, where is Jet? Why is she so easy with having James there? What happened to Jet's conscience? Dr. Seaman and Earl are keeping Johnny alive, well, quote unquote alive, until they can try to find the dog that houses her spirit. And he says, you got about 6 hours to find that dog. Meanwhile, Rachel's thinking maybe if she finds that box, she might be able to use that to help with resurrecting Johnny. But she knows that it's underground. And Dr. Seaman says, oh, wait, you mean the box that's over in the historical office? And Rachel can't believe that it's on display and that she didn't figure it out. Of course, it's at night, so the museum isn't open, but she's going to try to get out there anyway. And it's still snowing like crazy. The whole town is covered in massive amounts of snow. And her and James are trying to drive out in it. And of course, they get stuck in another very comical cartooning page, I should say, where there's multiple panels almost that look alike. And Terry Moore is able to make a humorous little sketch out of it. So I like that page. Rachel's getting more and more distraught, and she's yelling and she's wondering, talking to James, and she's wondering why he didn't. Basically, flashing back to that scene that you talked about, where James was warning her about the militia, And she says, I loved you. You loved me. You said you would spend eternity with me. And he says, I just had to humor you. She goes, what? Why? We were going to be married. And he says, I couldn't marry a child. She goes, what do you mean a child? She goes, you were 9 years old. And suddenly it clicks into her brain, Rachel starting to see, I don't know, real memories maybe this time, that she's actually been working with Lilith since she was 5. And when they were killing all those women, she was 9. So it wasn't when she was in her teens. And we see both of those scenes again. We see the scene where Lilith comes to Rachel and her parents, but now told in a whole different way and under different circumstances. That the father beats Bryn Aaron, and Lilith is not as threatening as she was in the first scene, basically putting the onus on the parents this time and not on Lilith. And then we see in the next scene between James and a very young Bryn Aaron. He's warning her, you got to go, but she's really young this time. Same thing happens. James gets shot. She tries to get James to drink the potion, which he does. And we see a man coming up and grabbing young Bryn Aaron, and that's how she's going to wind up being killed. So she was actually killed as a young girl. At least that's what I'm assuming at this point. And James says, it's coming back to you. It's all coming back to you, isn't it? And she says, yes, we were murdered for 4 crowns. We were just kids, and they murdered us. And James notices that the storm just keeps getting worse. And that's where the issue ends. It ends with them trekking through the snow. They got to get to the box.
So early on, we were, when Lilith encounters Rachel, she tells Rachel that she was 24 when she died. And then presume the first scene where we are introduced to Bryn Aaron, she's a teenager. And now, she was 9 when she died. So what's up with that? With Lilith, is it just Lilith? To her, time is nothing. She's lived for 300 years. Well, longer than that. It's 300 years since this incident in Manson. But she's been around forever. So maybe time means nothing to her. So numbers doesn't matter. Or does it mean something? And just that 4 crowns scene that was interesting.
Somebody's not telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing about this is that before we even get into that whole new revelation about the past, Rachel's telling James this is about the truth, and James is arguing, Lilith is a lying, she's a liar. You can't trust anything that she says. And then we get that revelation again about all the stuff that happened when Rachel or Bryn Aaron was younger than she thought. So. Yeah, there's a guy that I know that also reads this series, and he contacted me and asked me if I'd read number 22 after it came out, and I hadn't yet because I get my comics every 2 weeks, and it just hadn't arrived from DCBS. But when I did, it's like, because he was saying there's all this really cool stuff in it, and what'd you think? And I'm just confused about why all this misinformation. What does it gain Lilith? What does it gain Rachel to know this stuff?
Yeah, and we haven't seen the other sisters in a little bit, and there's a piece of the information that once we get it, I think we as collective readers will go, okay, but I don't think we've gotten there just yet.
Mm-hmm. And I know I hate to do this. I hate to rewrite what someone has given me, but it's probably too pat of a way to end the issue. But like you said, that last panel is them trekking off into the snow. It almost, to me, it would have been better for them to just be standing there and question, because it seems like Rachel there at the end where she's telling James, she realizes, we were murdered, both of us, for 4 crowns. And James says, it's getting worse. The storm's getting worse. Well, the situation's getting worse for the town. The snow is just the analogy for it. We need to keep going if we're going to make it. There's those are loaded words. And it just would have been, I think, a little more interesting if we were just shown Rachel just standing there. not moving. Just for a moment. I mean, obviously she would continue to do that. You know, she is the hero of the story, at least so far.
Right. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what Zoe's true purpose. She's like a wild card. Where is Jet? You know, what's going to happen with Johnny? Dr. Seaman is another wild card. I mean, there's things here that these pieces are going to eventually start falling together in an interesting way. And it's not like we have anything to go off of. It's not like, unless we really researched Lilith, and Malice, and is there a Dr. Seaman character in history or literature? You know, unless he's getting ideas from somewhere. This is a story that only makes sense in his head, Barrymore's head.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he can only give us pieces, and we have to be able to recognize them. And I think we did a great job of seeing a lot of stuff and making connections. And it's just a question of, okay, maybe we missed something, or maybe there's just not enough information even still. And eventually we'll get it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or, you know, if he's thinking about ending the series anytime soon, maybe he killed Malice, or maybe that whole thing was just to get rid of that storyline. You know, we don't know what creators have to go through in these kind of decisions.
Well, yeah, if you want to end this series and you want to satisfy the longtime readers of the series, then yeah, I would hate to be in that position.
Yeah. And no matter how it ends, you know, there's going to be some section that'll be a little disappointed, but you know, I'm interested to see what happens.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So I hope that we haven't. I mean, we've gone through quite a bit of information about each issue, but you know, don't think that you got everything from our discussion of this series. You know, I don't want the people to listen to this and think, oh well, I don't need to read this now, because we've only touched on the things that I think that we you know, the connections that we made, the things that what jumped out at us and were interesting to us. But there's so much detail in the story, and of course you're not seeing it by listening to this, and because you know, more than half of this is the visuals, the stuff that that's on the page.
He's a master cartoonist. I mean, his facial expressions. I mean, if you are a cartoonist or you want to be a cartoonist, you should be studying this stuff, because he has learned from the best. And I think what he has to say artistically on the page, I'm not saying it's necessarily revolutionary. It's not changing comics, but it's quality stuff. And he's a voice to pay attention to because of that. I mean, he's been in this business for a long time, doing what most people wish they could do, doing it on his own. And you know, some of those pages are beautiful. Mm-hmm. Even the horrific ones. There might be humor in the horrific ones. There might be horrific images in the beautiful ones. There's beautiful stuff in the gory things. I mean, it's really just amazing to look at.
Yeah. What this guy can do with backgrounds and, you know, weather for that matter. You know, heads and shoulders above a lot of artists out there in doing comic books right now.
Right, and he doesn't use many lines. I mean, it's he plays with negative spaces. He plays with, you know, I think his economy of line, you know, trying to use the least amount of line work and artistry to create some beautiful passages. That's a talent. You only get that by experimenting and by doing. Mm-hmm. You know, so you have to applaud him for that as well.
Yeah. So before we leave Rachel Rising, Peter, you've heard about the book has been optioned for a TV show, right?
Oh no.
Yeah. I don't have the details in front of me, but somebody is developing Rachel Rising as a TV series, and I have to wonder how can they pull off what Zoe does in this book on a TV show. Unless it's on HBO or something, which I don't think it is, but
right. Or even cable. I mean, you know, they're getting away with pretty much on a lot of those cable shows. I know ABC has a show coming out called like The Resurrection or something like that, and this is a popular theme. They sort of moved beyond the zombies, and it's happening in comics as well, where now it's suddenly this thing of bringing characters back to life, but in a different twist, so that they're not zombies, but they're something else.
Right.
Yeah.
But just the idea of showing a 9-year-old girl do these horrific acts of violence against animals and other people, I wonder about the reaction to from the viewing audience.
Right.
How successful that would really be.
They made a whole movie of The Omen and Damien, and that was a little kid doing crazy stuff.
I know. I guess I see Zoe as quite a bit more visceral in her actions. Yeah. So I don't know. I would watch it. Again, what does that say about me?
Well, it's a good story, and I could see it being developed. It fits right in with a lot of where TV is going. Where it's almost very Twin Peaks-ish, where there's a community and a lot of weird stuff happens, but you don't necessarily always see the weird stuff. And when it does happen, it's a major turning point in the story. So I could see that happening.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts in general about Rachel Rising, Peter?
No, I'm pretty good on this one. I just need to read these other issues. I need to find out what's happening.
Exactly. And hopefully Mr. Moore can continue the story on past what he originally planned, so we get more of this universe, because I'm not ready for it to be over with.
Cool. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So is there anything you'd like to tell the listeners about, the Daily Rios, or anything else coming up that you want to share?
Yeah, you can find me at thedailyrios.com. If you are someone who is looking to, or who is more interested in the podcasts more than the stuff on the website, check out the stuff on the website, because I think it'll at least make you go, oh, you know what? It has been a long time since I've read this or I've read that. I want to go check it out. I didn't know this was having a 50th anniversary, a 25th anniversary, or, I give suggestions on books coming out every Wednesday. I give suggestions on previews, stuff you may not know about, especially if you don't get previews. But yes, there will be podcasting, but go check out the website. And thank you for letting me play in your sandbox once more.
All right. Again, thank you very much, Peter. And if anybody would like to, contact us and talk about Rachel Rising or Lazarus or anything else that we brought up in these episodes, please do so. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. And of course, you can always visit longboxreview.wordpress.com. Thanks again, Peter, and have a great rest of your week.
I'll see you. I'll see you on Twitter and everywhere else.
That's right. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.